Today on Let Them Talk TV, we are going to look at all the future forms and we are going to go deep into all the rules. So hopefully you won't make any more mistakes. Now, as I'm sure you know, there are many ways of expressing the future in English. And here they all are in one gigantic, fantastic video. Everything you need to know about the future in English. Are you ready? Let's go. Today you will learn the following. Present simple for the future. Will and shall. Going to. Present continuous for the future. Comparisons between the different future tenses. We'll also correct common mistakes and we'll look at some other forms such as the infinitive for the future and some common expressions we use to talk about the future. And I've divided the video up into chapters so that you can go to the parts that interest you most or watch it all. By the way, English has no future tense. It has a present tense, a past tense, a present perfect tense, but there is no future form of the verb. So that's why we call them future forms rather than future tenses. Also, bear in mind that I won't be looking at compound tenses today, such as the future perfect. That I'll do in a different video. So let's start with the simplest, the present simple for the future. And we use this for scheduled events, timetables, and things that always happen at a certain point in the future from the perspective of the present. Let's look at some examples of that. The train leaves at 9:30. Okay? The show starts at 8 p.m. The meeting begins at 4 p.m. It's my birthday tomorrow. And of course, we can use it in questions too. When does the meeting start? Okay? When is your birthday? There you are, the present tense. We don't use it much except for schedules and facts. If I say I leave for India next Thursday, this is correct. Sounds a little bit strange, but you might say if you're consulting your personal timetable. Okay? And we'll look at other forms in a moment and compare it to this too. So we've done that, so let's move on to will and shall. Will and shall have a conjugation, and it's like this. I shall, or will. You will. He, she, it will. We shall, or will. They will. We'll have a look at some examples, but first of all, why? Why have I put will in brackets next to I and we? Okay, that's because in spoken English, and sometimes in written English too, we often use will, even though the conjugation says shall. There are some exceptions to that, so do be careful. Also, as I'm sure you are aware, there is a contracted form, I'll, he'll, will, etc., which is the same for will and shall. The contracted negative is of will not is won't, and the negative of shall not is shan't. Now, you won't hear shan't very much in spoken English, and even in written English it's not that common, but it's important to be aware that it exists in case you come across it. Okay. So when we use will, to give or request information about the future, to talk about facts, to make predictions, but be careful because sometimes we use going to make predictions. I'll come to that later. To make promises, to make decisions at the time of speaking, to make threats, and to make offers and requests. So let's look at some examples of each of those cases. So giving information about the future. John will be here tomorrow. Will you be at the meeting? To make personal predictions, and often this goes after words such as I think, I believe, or I reckon. I think she'll be late again. I reckon she'll pass the exam if she studies hard. To make promises. I'll call you back. I won't be late again. We'll do that next time. To make decisions at the time of speaking. It's closed. We'll have to go somewhere else. No, I missed the train. I'll get a taxi. So think about it like this. Whenever you say, I know, it's usually followed by will, because it's a new idea, it's a new decision. So, for example, no donuts. I'll get a croissant. What should I do? I know, I'll invite her to the theatre. There you are. New decisions, okay? Use it to make offers. Use will to make offers. I'll make breakfast this morning. You look confused. I'll explain everything, okay? To make requests with will you. Will you help me with this? Will you give me an answer by Thursday? You could use can or could in these situations, but it's not exactly the same. Will here is not really a question. In fact, it's not really even a future tense. It's more a polite imperative. So instead of saying open the door, add will to sound more polite. Will you open the door? Sometimes you don't need to follow it with a question mark because it's not really a question. You can also use will to make threats. If you do that again, I'll call the police. If you don't watch to the end of this video, I'll do something. In the above examples, I used contractions. Now, if you're stressing will or shall, you don't need a contraction. For example, I will call the police if you do that again, or I shall call the police if you do that again, if you prefer. Shall is perfectly correct here. And you might hear it sometimes, but as I said, it's usually will in spoken English. The exception is shall is used in formal written English, where you might see shall quite often. And even there, even in formal written English, you can still contract it. So I'll instead of I shall. And yes, by the way, yes, you can use contractions in formal written English. It's a kind of a myth that you shouldn't. If you want more information, you should see the video I made about that up here. And there is one case where you use shall in spoken English, and that's for making offers and suggestions. For example, shall we go? Not will we go. No. Shall we meet next week? Do you remember I said that you use will to make an offer? I'll make you breakfast. But if you turn the offer into a question, you do it with shall and not will. To look at the example we saw earlier, shall I make you breakfast? You look confused. Shall I explain? Shall I ask Edith if she wants to join us? You can't use will here because it will look like you're asking if something is going to happen. Will I make breakfast? I don't know, will you? So, shall I make breakfast for an offer? So use shall to make an offer in a question form. Now, will and shall for commands and emphatic speech. This is a super advanced part and it's only occasionally used, so feel free to skip this part and move on to the next section if there is too much detail. But if you're still here, you're interested in this advanced stuff, then let's look at it. So we looked at earlier the conjugation of will and shall, but this conjugation is reversed for commands, emphatic speech, and for intent. So the conjugation in those cases goes like this. I will, you shall, we will, he, she, it shall, they shall. Okay? We'll look at some examples. I will win the race. You shall get what you want. They shall not pass. Now that's a famous slogan that's been used many times in a war when defending against the enemy. Or indeed, you shall not pass.
You shall not pass!
You will often see this shall in legal documents. For example, the buyer shall be responsible for the upkeep and the management of the communal area. We will return to will later when we compare it to going to and other future forms. Let's look at going to. Going to is used to express plans for the future and predictions based on science and what's obvious. Let's look at plans and decisions first. Remember that we said that we use will to talk about decisions you make in the moment. Well, with going to, it's about plans you made before speaking or writing. I'll give you some examples, but remember that going to is often pronounced gonna when we are speaking quickly. Gonna is not a slang form, by the way. It's perfectly correct and expected in fluent speech, even formally, but it's not a written form. It's only a spoken form. Anyway, let's look at some examples with going to. One day, I'm gonna travel the world. If she quits her job, she's gonna move to Tokyo. When I say plans, it doesn't have to be a big, life-changing plan. Not at all. So, for example, I'm gonna have a glass of water. Okay. We also use going to make predictions based on science. And we'll compare it with will for predictions in a moment. But first, let's look at a couple of examples. She's going to have a baby. Now, science tells me that that is what happens to women who are pregnant. The weather forecast says it's going to rain. You know, if you don't tie up your shoelaces, you're going to trip over, okay? It's based on science, not a personal opinion. That's what happens when you walk around with shoelaces that are untied. Now let's move on to present continuous for the future. We use the present continuous for the future to talk about appointments and arrangements we've made and things that you believe are certain to happen, okay? This future is sometimes called the diary future. Because when we're looking at our appointments diary, you'll express what's in there with the present continuous for the future. To construct it, you need the present continuous and a time reference, although this is often just implied. Let's look at some examples of that. I'm flying to Germany tonight. So you've got present continuous, I'm flying to Germany, and a time reference, tonight. When do you use this? You use it to say that it's certain, at least in your mind. You already have the boarding pass, perhaps. Another example, I can't go to work tomorrow because I'm having my wisdom teeth out. Okay, I have an appointment with the dentist. I'm meeting Anna at 2 p.m. on Tuesday at Cafe Joe. You can use it in the negative to say what you haven't got in your diary. No, I'm not doing anything on Saturday night. Why? You know, we're not going to Spain this summer. The trip was cancelled due to the pandemic. And of course, you can use it in questions. What are you doing next Tuesday? A time reference is normally in the sentence. However, it can be omitted if it's clear that it's something certain to happen from the context. For example, she's selling her house and moving to Alaska. You don't normally use this type of future tense when there is uncertainty, such as after words like I think, I hope, I believe, or reckon. There could be exceptions, but it's unlikely. With those words, you're more likely to use will or going to. Now let's compare the different future forms. First of all, it's important to remember that sometimes there is more than one way to express a sentence with a future meaning correctly. Okay? So don't panic if you're not sure. Just put what you think, what sounds most natural, and you're probably right. Remember that most native speakers won't know these rules. Well, they'll know them instinctively, but they won't have learnt all the grammar as you're learning today. Of course, the grammar helps and will speed up your understanding, but the best way, as with any grammar, is just to speak a lot, listen a lot, and read a lot, and get a feel for it. And that's the best way, of course, to learn this stuff. But anyway, let's have a look at an example. He's arriving this evening. He'll arrive this evening. He's going to arrive this evening. He arrives this evening. Which is correct? Well, all of them are correct, actually. There is little difference between them, at least for the listener. We could go through them one by one. He's arriving this evening. He's got the ticket. He's on the way. Okay, that's a diary future. He'll arrive this evening. I'm giving information about the future. He's going to arrive this evening. This is the plan. He arrives this evening. I've seen the schedule, and this is when he'll be here. But let's look at some cases where the meanings are different. First of all, will and going to. If something is planned in advance, use going to. If it's a new idea, use will. For example, I'm going to have a cheeseburger, fries and ice cream. Aren't you supposed to be on a diet? Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I'll have a vegan salad and I'll have a mineral water then. Okay. In order to save money and help the environment, I'm going to sell my car and buy a bicycle. Notice, by the way, in that example, that going to covers both the verb sell and buy. Or you could say, I've got a brilliant idea. I'll sell my car and buy a bicycle, and that way I'll help the environment. This is obviously a new idea. Now, we've already seen that you can use both going to and will to make predictions, but in different ways. Use will when the prediction is your opinion, and going to when the science or the situation tells you what will happen. With will, we often use predictions with words like think or believe, or in conditionals with if. So, for example, he made a lot of mistakes, but I think he'll do better next year. I'm sure the party will be a big success. If I train every day, I'll be able to run the marathon. So these are personal predictions. With going to, it's the science. The company is losing money, and at this rate, it's going to be bankrupt within 6 months. The train is broken down, and we are going to be late. Okay, that's what happens when trains break down. Sometimes both are possible. Is it a personal prediction or is it science? So, for example, within 10 years, cars will be driverless. That's my opinion from what I know. Within 10 years, all cars are going to be driverless. It's a scientific fact that I read in a magazine. If you eat like that, you'll get fat. If you eat like that, you're going to get fat. Both are correct. We often use will after if, but going to is also possible. Are we making a personal prediction or a scientific prediction based on your knowledge of overeating? Okay, so both are possible. Look at these sentences. One day, I'll be famous. One day, I'm going to be famous. Is it a personal prediction with will or a plan for the future with going to? So you see, sometimes more than one form can be correct. If you see clouds in the sky, you could say, I think it'll rain soon. That's my opinion from what I see. Or you could say, I think it's going to rain. My knowledge of meteorology and dark grey clouds tells me that this is what's going to happen. But what you cannot say is, she's pregnant, she will have a baby in 7 months. It's never your opinion, okay? You're talking about future facts. She's going to have a baby in 7 months. That's the only correct way to say it, because that's what the science tells us. We've run out of fuel and we are going to crash. That's the only correct way to say it. It can only be a prediction based on science. Let's look at the difference between going to versus the present continuous for the future. Remember, going to is about plans, and the present continuous is about appointments or arrangements. So the difference is mostly in the degree of certainty. So, for example, I'm going to visit New York this summer. I'm visiting New York this summer. In the second case, you probably got the ticket, okay? I'm going to see my girlfriend on Friday night. It's a plan. I'm seeing my girlfriend on Friday night. I've made the arrangements with her. There is one exception to this. We often drop the second go in a going to future. So, for example, I'm going to the cinema tonight. That's the present continuous for the future. It's not the going to future because there is only one verb. You have your ticket. It's an arrangement. It's the present continuous for the future. But what about this? When I have enough money, I'm going to Australia. It's a plan. You don't have the ticket. So it should be, when I have enough money, I'm going to go to Australia, which is perfectly correct. And we often say it like that. But sometimes some people don't like to have two goes in one sentence. So we change the going to go, or just to going to. So let's look at some common mistakes and let's see if you can correct them. What will you do tonight? Is that correct? We're asking about what's in your diary, what arrangements you made, so the correct sentence is, what are you doing tonight? I will fly to Tokyo tomorrow morning. Is that correct? No. Once again, it's about your arrangements. If you have the ticket, you'd say, I'm flying to Tokyo tomorrow morning. I'm thirsty. I will have a glass of orange juice. Is that correct? No, you know it isn't. It's, I'm thirsty. I'm going to have a glass of orange juice. It's a plan, even though it's a small plan. And with plans, you use going to. However, if you make a new decision, then you can use will. What? They don't have orange juice? Okay, I'll have pineapple juice. Next one. I've eaten 12 donuts. I will throw up. Throw up, by the way, means to vomit. Is it correct? No, not correct. We're making a prediction here. And science tells me, the evidence tells me that you eat lots and lots of donuts, you are going to throw up. Okay? It's scientific prediction. I'm going to throw up. Don't worry, I'm going to do this for you tomorrow. Is that correct? Sounds a little strange. If you're making a promise, you're more likely to use will. Don't worry, I'll do this for you tomorrow, I promise. Next one. I call you tomorrow. I call you tomorrow. Is that correct? No, you know it isn't. This is a mistake. You usually use the present simple to talk about things that happen regularly. I work every day. But you don't use it for a future tense, okay? You don't use a present simple for a future tense. The exception is a timetable, but this is not a timetable. It's either a promise or it's giving information about the future. So the correct sentence would be, I'll call you tomorrow. I promise, I'll call you tomorrow. In the same way, we say, I'll let you know, and not I let you know. I'll tell you later. And this is a very common mistake that I hear extremely often, so do learn it. Next one. Give him the book when he will arrive. Not correct. We don't normally put will after when statements. So the correct sentence is, give him the book when he arrives. Here are some other ways to talk about the future. The infinitive for the future. Now I left this till last because we rarely use it in spoken English. However, we do use it to discuss events and things that are scheduled to happen, and you'll often see it in newspapers and often in the headlines. So let's look at some examples. The president is to visit Thailand next month. Okay, this is in his schedule. Okay, Bigwig Airlines is to open a new route to Asia. When the infinitive for the future is used in a headline, the verb to be is often omitted. And looking at those examples we just used, president to visit Thailand next month. Hurricane to hit Florida in the next 24 hours. Now, if you're not familiar with newspaper headlines in English, I do suggest that you learn it and go and check some English newspapers, English language newspapers, and you'll see that it's used quite often there. Finally, here we have a few English expressions that we use with a future meaning. So let's have a look at those. First of all, to be about to plus infinitive. Now, this means something is going to happen very soon or almost immediately. Okay, and it's a very common expression. I'm about to leave. Can you call me back? I thought it was a joke and I was about to laugh when I realized she was serious. Of course, in that sentence, we're looking at the future from the perspective of the past. Next we have on the brink of or on the verge of. And I'm putting these together because they have a pretty similar meaning. They both mean that something dramatic, something big is going to happen, either positive or negative. So for example, we are on the verge of finding a cure for the common cold. The two countries are on the brink of war. Bound to plus infinitive, which we use to say that something is inevitable given what I know. You're working with people who have no interest in this project, so it's bound to fail. I don't like him, but in the present situation, yes, I'm afraid he is bound to be elected as president. I hope you found that useful. Let us know in the comments if I've left something out or if there's something you want me to cover in a future video. Stay mellow and do your thing. I'm out of here. Bye.